Okay, today we're in Warrenville, Illinois, and we're going to start our first ever Behind the Wall series in which we'll follow a new home being built from beginning to end. So hope you join us each week as we roll out a new segment about the construction and products that go into building this beautiful single-family home. So without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, today's episode is all about the foundation. It's where it all begins. So let's go find Court and find out what we need to know about the process.
Let's go back to where we were at the beginning. So the surveyor has come out and he's staked the offsets where the home is going to be built. The excavator then comes in using those offset stakes, and you can see him laying out the foundation with the tape measures, and they're pulling all of the different offsets. And whenever they're digging, you've got to always remember they dig the house 3 feet larger than it's supposed to be because we have to give the concrete workers room to get down there for the forms. After he's laid it out, he starts digging. As you can see, once he starts digging, he's got to figure out the elevation grades, and that's what he's out there using the story pole and the transit for. He's ensuring that he's digging the foundation at the proper depth for the footings and the foundation walls to give the foundation the proper basement height. And so that's what you're seeing here.
And the goal is to get down to the clay material?
Yeah, so in our area, we consider clay good material. Some parts of the country, there's what they call expansive clays, which you'd never want to build on. In our area, we have certain clays that are non-expansive, and they become very good structurally, and that's what we set our foundations on. And so this is one of those classic differences. You go across the United States, things can be different. In Virginia, clays are expansive because of all of the river clays and stuff like that, and they can actually blow foundation walls out, and they have the same issues out in Colorado, where here in Illinois, in a lot of places, we have this very good structural clay that works fantastic for building homes on. The next step is the concrete company comes in and they start laying out the footings. Interestingly enough, in this situation, they're putting the stone in first inside of the footings where the basement slab will sit, because that makes it easier for them to work. And you can see where the footings are actually laid out, where all the wood framing is. After they put the stone in, the next step is they're going to come in and they're going to pour the concrete in those footings. And so the footings will be installed. And you can see the footings on the outside where the wall will be, as you can also see the footings on the inside where there's piers, where the columns that will hold the steel up that supports the structure of the floor joists of the home will be installed. Something interesting to note regarding footings is there's different widths of footings based on the size of wall and the weight and also the soil conditions that you use. Typically on an 8-inch wall in our area, we use 16-inch wide footings. On a 10-inch wall, we'll use 20-inch wide footings. Now, for the pier pads where we install the steel in the middle, where the columns will be, those are typically roughly 3 feet wide by 3 feet wide by a foot thick, and have some rebar in there for extra strength for that because of the point load that they take from the steel columns. Now, as they're pouring the concrete, they're coming behind and make sure that the concrete is filling any voids and there's no air bubbles, and they're literally kind of tamping and helping the concrete to settle into the forms to make sure there's a complete fill. And you'll actually see something a little bit more interesting even on the walls than what they're doing here.
And so then now the footings are in, so what happens next? When do the foundation walls start being replaced?
Literally in the next couple of days, and they'll start installing the forms for the walls. It typically will take a day to 3 days to install the forms for the walls. And it's kind of interesting because if you think about, you've got a form on each side, what holds them together, we call those rod ties, which hold the forms together. Those rod ties end up staying in the concrete wall, and they just knock them off when they pull the forms off. And so you'll see some thin little slivers of metal lots of times in a concrete wall, and that's what those are. Those are rod ties. And so another interesting thing, again, is we get back to that void issue that we talked earlier about with the footings, is you can see the guy actually walking around, and he's got what looks like a giant weed whacker with a big whip, and it's going down into the concrete, and he's caught making sure that the concrete fully settles in the wall, and he's kind of raising it up and down, as you can see, and it helps with ensuring that we get a full settlement of the concrete in the forms and there's no air gaps or voids. I thought this would be an interesting time to talk about drain tile. People hear about it, they don't completely understand. This is basically what drain tile is. It's a plastic material, and if you can see, it's got small holes in it, and this allows water to get into it, then flow along the footing of the foundation, goes into the sump pit, and we pump the water away from the house. And so this is what helps keep a dry basement. Talking about the way we finish the exterior of the foundation before we backfill. There's two ways you can treat it. There's something called damp proofing, which is a spray-on tar material that keeps moisture from penetrating and protects the foundation. And then there's a secondary system where you can do waterproofing, which is really truly creating a drainage plane, and that's what we've got here. The Delta waterproofing system is creating a drainage plane where any moisture that gets in here will go right down to the footing, into where the drain tile is, and go onto the sump pump. We're actually now in a finished foundation, and the interesting thing here is we can actually now see the steel is set. And so the steel is set based on the architect and the engineer's requirements structurally to ensure that the home is supported correctly, and we can now see where those columns sit on the pier pads in the middle of the foundation, which were those funny holes that we talked about earlier.
So Court, why are the boards here against the wall?
Well, what these are braces for the foundation that we use during the backfill. So we've got a long wall, and we install braces so that when the dirt's put up against it, it doesn't sway the wall, and the concrete wall is kept plumb and straight. And eventually these won't be needed because we'll have all the framing in, and the floor joists and everything will hold the walls in place.
And the bolts here, those are put in when?
So the bolts are put in when they pour the wall, and what these bolts are used that they take the plate that they set the floor joists on, and it actually bolts the structure down to the foundation to make sure there's no uplift where the house literally can be lifted off its foundation. That's what it's for. So when we hear about tornadoes, that's part of what those are in place for.
Oh wow, okay.
This is kind of an interesting code issue that you're seeing here. Not only are we dealing with light vent issues in a basement, but we're also dealing with emergency access issues. Anytime that you have a basement or any occupiable room, they typically require two means of egress. So one, you would have the stairs going up, and then secondarily, here's a window well, and you can actually even see the ladder in the back side of the window well, that somebody, if there was a fire blocking the stairs, they could actually escape out through the window well. So that's it for today. The foundation's in place. We've backfilled. The surveyors actually come back and checked at the foundation and done a spot survey that we put it where it's supposed to be, the height it's supposed to be. The steel's in place, so next week when we come back, it'll be fun. The carpenter's gonna be wailing away.
So we're doing framing next week.
Framing's next week.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Court.
Great to see you.